Hello, this is Jamie Mitchell, and I am back with another episode of the Libertarian Uncensored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Uncensored subreddit. Let's get right into it. So first we have, Judge blocks Biden administration from granting legal status to immigrant spouses of U.S. citizens from CBSNews.com by Flimsy Al 5563, and I personally would disagree with that ruling. I think we should make the path to citizenship as easy as possible. But with that being said, I don't like all the benefits that all the immigrants are getting as well. I do think we should make citizenship as easy as possible. That being said, we do have a lot of illegal immigrants, and the government's giving them like $150,000 a month. I read online, and I don't think that's that libertarian either. I think we should have a path to citizenship, but I don't think that path to citizenship should be giving you all these benefits that they're currently giving all the illegal immigrants, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Republican group cites notorious Dred Scott ruling as reason Kamala Harris can't be president from independent.co.uk by CH4Locks, and that's a cross post from the moderate politics subreddit. And yeah, I personally think that's just kind of, Reddit propaganda go burr post, it's probably some fringe group, but they're making it sound like it's the entire Republican Party, and that's pretty much what social media is at this point. It's all find some crazy outcast and then make him seem like he's the entire party. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have, in the American Intermountain West, electoral votes are harmful, from Nathan RH, and that's a self-post that they made. They said, state lines suck ass, Phoenix is an abomination, and cutting up the Colorado River Basin like it's the dumbest twig thing ever. JWP was right, voters for fighting, whiskeys for drinking. It's a royal pain in the ass to run fences over Colorado Plateau stuff. All in the suburbs are packed. Living off the grid is gone. This is because western states are pressured to fill in population, but watershed is objectively a higher priority. You can see how even well-meaning measurement can screw it up. Wyoming should not be under pressure to populate because that's not best use of the land. I swear to God, some Whig must have drawn an X through Hoppy and Utland just to screw them over. Worse or as bad, they just indifferently continued the same lines through specifically mountain land that emit from the Mississippi. It is mind-blowing how bad state lines are in the Intermountain West. Nevada benefits is in part because its neighbors don't. The U.S. line and idiotic Gadsden, instead of Baja Purchase, have screwed over all the Navajo and Apache. Washingtons are green and the rest is rock, but there are straight lines over uneven ground. U.S. lines suck. What's nationalism worth now? Do the regulators or the Hoppy? The whole Intermountain West would be far better managed by watersheds and states. States' rights are used by Nevada to be Nevada and Utah to be Utah. It's meaningful, not always positive, and that's the only upside. In these states where Nazis in plain sight try to betray Washington's libertarian constitution for states' rights aren't good for the Intermountain West. And I guess I would agree with that. Ultimately, all state boundaries are going to be arbitrary. Ultimately, all boundaries, to some extent, are going to be arbitrary. And, that's why I personally don't really care too much for them. And, yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have proving them wrong. After raising minimum wage, California has more fast food jobs than ever, from Yahoo.com by Ninja Lover. And that's the story from Salon on Yahoo.com, so it's kind of going to be more communist propaganda. The Salon's pretty much neo-communist, I would say. And yeah, I personally think if the government wants to force people to pay minimum wage, that's their prerogative. But I think it's important to remember the ultimate minimum wage is zero. And despite what articles like this would have you believe, some chains were forced to close because of the minimum wage increase. I think Foster's Freeze was one of them that had to close a lot of their locations, and that's why you have to let the market decide. You can't let the government decide what the minimum wage is. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Florida police officer arrested and charged in fatal shooting of 23-year-old airman Roger Fortson, from Reason.com by Flimsy Al 5563. And yeah, I think that's good. I'm glad the government's is trying to hold its own accountable here, but that doesn't usually stick, like we just saw with the Breonna Taylor case. And that's my thoughts there. Then we have Florida's definition of religion is too narrow for school chaplain programs as Satanic Temple. Florida welcomes only legitimate and officially authorized chaplains to become volunteers at their local schools, from CLTampa.com by Swanpanky Dan. And yeah, I personally don't really care for chaplains in schools, but if the school wants them, but then the Satanic Temple is always going to say, oh, now we need to have satanic chaplains in schools. and gonna try and stop that. I personally want ideology out of schools entirely. But with that being said, it's only a religious ideology that the Satanic Temple tries to go after. Never like ideology like gender ideology like LGBTQ or like social justice ideology like BLM. They only ever try and go after religious ideology. Even though I would argue LGBTQ and BLM and all the social justice movement is human secularism at this point is pretty much a religion in itself, I would say, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Even if you're never going to classify it as one. Then we have Trump Golf Course set to host January 6th Awards Gala fundraiser for Capitol Riot defendants from USAtoday.com by Ninja Lover, and I personally wouldn't do that, but if he wants to do that, I think he should be able to. I personally don't really care for how people storm the Capitol, but if he wants to support them, that's on him. Then we have Albuquerque's police chief says cops have a Fifth Amendment right to leave their body cameras off from Yahoo.com by Donald Key, and that's a recent article from Yahoo.com. I don't know, I guess Yahoo's allowing some leverage sources like Salon and Reason now to be on their website. And then we have, I would agree with that. I would disagree with that. I think, if you're an agent of the government, you should be held accountable for as long as you're on the job. I think, we shouldn't just have body cameras for the police. We should probably arguably have them for the politicians as well, so they don't do anything funny when they're in the government. And that's, and my thoughts are, that's my thoughts there. If you're on a government job, you should be forced to be held accountable for your actions. And I think a body camera is a reasonable thing to expect for you to have and have it on as well. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Mexico pauses diplomatic relations with U.S. and Canadian embassies from CNN. And I don't know what that's about. That's from Zachness. And to hold the will have judges elected by popular vote. Okay, so I guess if I personally think I wouldn't pause diplomatic relations over that, but I do think if people do want to elect judges by popular vote, I think you should be able to do so. But if we want to pause diplomatic relations over someone criticizing your idea of doing that, that's ultimately on you. I personally wouldn't do that. I wouldn't pause diplomatic relations over that though. Then we have God Love Corporate Liability Shielding Right, and that's from Paton 13. That's a Tom the Dancing Bug comic. News of the Times, accused burglar incorporates self. When police caught Richard Richie Tyner during a burglary, he quickly produced and executed a corporate charter. OL officers who sign here and as witnesses, Tyner Co. will be a totally created corporation. And then they can't get him because he is a corporation. And my thoughts on that are, police, they usually do go after individuals rather than corporations, but that's because I think, police, we don't really use them for white-collar crime as much as we use them for, just blue-collar general crime. And, ultimately, I think if people do want to start identifying corporations as a way to get out of the police authoritarianism, I think they should be able to do so. I think people should be able to identify as whatever they want to. With that being said, that leads us to all, like, the trans age, trans, racial people, and I think, if you want to identify as anything, you should be able to do so, but that to mean I should be forced to accept whatever you identify as. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Texas State Police gears up for massive expansion of surveillance tech from TexasObserver.org by Flimsy Out 5563. And my thoughts on that are, I get that's not good, but ultimately the state has access to whatever tech it wants to use, and sometimes you just have to cope with it. Then we have I Don't Care About Your Religion from EZC275, and that's a cross from the Mind Blowing Thing subreddit. And I think that's Anna Kasparian of the Young Turks talking about how she doesn't care how religious people will use their religion as a means to justify supporting abortion. And I would agree with that. I personally think, if you think abortion is wrong because of your religion, I think you should be able to think that, but I don't think you should be forcing that on other people. I would add, I don't care about, anything you have. I don't care about your sexual orientation or your race. I don't care, but put your penis wherever you want to, but as long as it's consensual and the person's of age. But with that being said, I don't care about it as long as you're not trying to force it down my throat. And I think it's the same thing with her and religion here. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have, tis the season for data breaches for an election. Could that compromise mail-in ballots? From Muck 30, and they said, August 26, 2024, Yahoo News, don't get tricked. How to check if your social security number is part of a data breach. Estimate 2.9 billion records, including names, addresses, social security numbers, may be affected after National Public Data confirmed it suffered a massive data breach involving personal information of millions of Americans. Keep focused on Russians, China, and your credit scores, though. Will we have another record turnout ballots cast again this year? And, yeah, ultimately, I definitely do think, sometimes the elections, they might not be completely orderly, especially since everyone's social security number, like, I think that's why I heard everyone's social security number is pretty much leaked at this point. And, yeah, that definitely might go into election fraud. That's personally why I think we need open ballot rather than the secret ballot that we have, so people can't lie about who they voted for. And, yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. But, yeah, definitely question if the election is, you should always be able to question election integrity, I would add, like this person is doing. People say, if my party wins the election, it's a completely legitimate election, but if the other party wins, then it's a rigged election. In 2016, the Dems lost, and they said, oh, Russia rigged it, and in 2020, the Republicans lost, and they said, oh, it was all rigged. And yeah, we'll see what happens this time. Maybe it will suddenly be fine to question election integrity again if the Dems lose. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Trump threatens to jail Zuckerberg for life from Politico.com by Skeptical Bob. And, yeah, I personally don't think that's good. But, ultimately, I do think, Tim Walz is saying, oh, there's no exemption in the First Amendment for hate speech or misinformation. So I definitely think he and Kamala are probably going to jail their political opponents as well if they don't obey their censor's orders. And, Zuckerberg did come forward recently, said, the Biden administration told me to censor stuff, and we did. And, yeah, that's why we need to hold both sides accountable for anti-First Amendment stuff, like telling private social media companies to censor. And that's my thoughts there. Then we have 10 seconds from EZC75, and that's across from the 2A Radical subreddit. And it's a guy saying, so, my daughter tells me you're a lawyer. And then the guy says, yeah, I represent the ATF in court, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Bureau. And the other guy says, yeah, we have exactly 10 seconds to get the fuck out of my house. And I would agree very much with that. I think, we don't trust anyone who's in the government or who works for government. They are on the government side, not yours. And so I would agree very much with that the guy's perspective. Then we have First D-Tree from EZC75, and that's cross from the 2A Radical subreddit, and it sets up a picture of Thomas Jefferson with a tree. It says, that's a nice looking liberty tree you've got there, but it's looking a little bit thirsty. Sure would be ashamed if someone watered and it zooms on his face. And I think, if people do want to use violent action to overthrow an oppressive government, I think they should be able to. But with that being said, I think people are too busy circles working on social media these days to ever make that an actual reality. And that's my thoughts there. Then we have, oi, you got a license for that, from EZC75, and that's another crossover from the 2A Radical subreddit. And the guy in the ATF hat says, you can't sell firearms without a license. And then the other guy says, what if I get a friend I got and sell him a muffin for $1,200? And then the guy in the ATF hat does the triggered NPC face. And yeah, I think, if people want to sell anything without a license, they should be able to. I don't think government license should be required for anything. People should just do whatever they see fit. And I think that's very much the libertarian perspective. So, I think that's going to be it. We're going to wrap it up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.